Taylor. Welcome back to In the Record Room. And listen, today this is really exciting. I'm joined by DJ, promoter, presenter, music lover, and the legend that is Wendy May. Wendy, thank you so much for joining me. How are you
It's
today?
an absolute pleasure. Yeah, good. I'm looking forward to this. It's good. I always like talking about music, so it's a joy.
Brilliant. Listen, I've been looking around and I remember the Tube and things like this. And so, a lot of your biography, I think, is very relevant to where you are and what you're doing. And I know that you started, I think, buying punk records for Virgin. That was...
Yeah. That was my first sort of into a record shop was 1977 in Virgin, Swansea. I was actually working in a little record shop in Carmarthen, further north above Swansea. In the sort of hippie days, I left London and lived in a caravan and all that. I'm an old bird, by the way. And I just wanted to get out of London because it was so hot. It was the summer of '76 when everything was melting. So I went to Wales because my brother had moved there. And I got a little job in a record shop in Carmarthen and bought my first Stranglers and Damn singles there, Eagland's Records of King Street. And then one day I was working, I didn't have a phone at home in my bedsit, and I was working in the shop and I had a phone call from the manager of Swansea Virgin, and he said, are you Wendy? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you like punk rock? And I went, yeah. And I said, good, we need a punk rock buyer because I hate it. And I was like 18 at the time and it had just kind of started, and I was really excited but kind of fed up that I'd left London just as something really exciting was happening. But rather than move back to London like my brother did, he joined the Lurkers, and I stayed and got a job at Virgin Swansea. Yeah, so I was part of the sort of Swansea punk scene for a couple of years.
Wow. I mean, obviously you've done...
on my 19th birthday,
Oh, brilliant. And I mean, reading through, you were the lead singer. I remember the Boot Hill Foot Tappers. I used to read the NME when I was a teenager, and that was, I had a big pile of the NMEs because they were enormous in the 80s. It was a big...
Yeah, well, it was the Bible, wasn't it? Really,
it was.
We didn't have the internet. It was our Bible every Thursday. We'd be like, oh, what's happening? What's out?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially living in Wales, it was really like, we couldn't wait for the NME to come Thursday mornings, But,
it was fascinating. I had a giant box and it was about this high in the end. And then, I mean, there's so much for us to talk about. So maybe it might just be an idea if I just get you to kind of tell me where you began and how your journey brought you, because really yours is a life of vinyl. And that's really, really fascinating.
Well, it's a life of music. It's a life of geeks. It's interesting. I've been looking at some of your other contributors on this lovely little show, and we're all roughly about the same age. I'm a little bit older than most of the guys, but I was never part of the mod scene. That's the weird thing, is that I love the music, but I've never really been part of a scene. Even when I first got into music, because I'm the youngest of a big family, I've got lots of older brothers and sisters, and when I was about 11, 12, I used to go to a youth club in Wandsworth, just up from Southfields station, and that's kind of when I first saw 7-inch singles. My sister Tina had just started buying Motown singles and Motown Chartbuster albums, and she used to go out on a Saturday night to Tiffany's in Wimbledon or something and dance to the Formations at the top of the stairs and Marvin Gaye and things like that, and old Scar, and so she got a dance set and I shared a bedroom with her, so she introduced me to lots of the stuff that I still love now. My musical tastes have gone sort of like that and then come back to where I started from, in a way, but that was my first sort of introduction to music. And at the youth club, it was run by some nuns, and they had a dance set, and we were allowed to take a pile of singles. And they dropped down, they put 6, but you had to give them to Sister Mary or whatever her name was. And the boys would be on one side of the room, and the girls would be on the other. And we'd give them a pile of singles and let them drop down, and we'd all dance. Usually the girls, and the boys would stand and watch us. But we used to sneak Max Romeo's Wet Dreaming. So every time that dropped down, then the nun would kind of whip it off and go, oh, be Jesus, we can't have that being played here.
That's forbidden.
And then we'd sneak it back in the next pile, and that would go on, And there was a great shop in Clapham Junction that used to sell sort of reggae and ska, and they had a cheap box outside, which is all I could afford on my Saturday job earnings. And I used to pick up Dr. Bird label stuff and a bit of Trojan. But so I just sort of got into that through my sister Tina, really.
Wow. And how did you because as you say, your taste is very broad, but how did you kind of get into soul, I suppose? It's the question I'm asking everybody.
Well, for me, music is about emotion, right? It's about passion and emotion. And as much as I love punk, I like the stuff that was more emotional, and I have to have a voice. If it, I don't mind instrumentals, obviously, but if I'm going to have a singer, it's got to be a singer that really resonates and kind of makes me feel something. So I never really liked the punk that was all like just shouty. I love Pete Shelley, I love The Only Ones, I love Fergal Sharkey's voice, Hugh Cornwell's voice. I've never really liked shouty sort of music. That's what I call it anyway. And I never really got into heavy rock. My older sister Jenny loved King Crimson and Black Sabbath and all that. Well, I never liked anything like that. But the soul really kind of, I could feel it. I love dancing. I've always loved dancing. I've always loved showing off. I was the youngest out of a big family, so I was always putting on little talent shows and stuff, But I think soul music for me was just seeing clips of Ready Steady Go and stuff like that. I just thought, seeing Otis Redding and but I think for me to actually go to a club that played soul music was 1980 when I left Wales. I went and managed the Virgin Record shop in Notting Hill Gate in southwest London.
Brilliant.
And it was a tiny little counter service shop. It was just me, my assistant manager. And it was all vinyl, obviously, like this. The records were in racks behind us, and we had the vinyl, in behind, and just the sleeves out front. And my assistant manager was a guy called Tony Rounce.
Okay.
Who used to go on tour with the Jam. He was the Jam's DJ.
Yeah.
So he took me to see quite a lot of moddy type bands, and he took me to see Adi Crosdale and that lot do the 60s Soul Club. That was 1980. I was just like, this is fantastic. A little sweaty West Hampstead Moonlight Club.
Right.
It kind of had the energy of some of the punk gigs I'd been to 4 years before.
Yeah.
But the music just moved me,
Yeah.
Absolutely. To hear Darryl Banks and, all the classics.
Must have been amazing. Did you have a membership card? Was it that?
I should have got it out, actually. I've still got my membership card. I can't remember what number I was, but Paul Weller, was offered them there and dancing. No, it was great.
Wow.
Really,
And I mean, so that's
100 people maybe.
Yeah. And that's a little bit earlier than a lot of people, isn't it? A lot of people tended to get into things a little bit later.
Yeah, because that's only because I'm that bit older.
I wasn't going to say that. I was just going to say you're a pioneer, Wendy. So you were But I mean, and it must have been extraordinary because I can understand the energy of punk gigs. And I was a Cub Scout when punk was around. So I remember there were guides who would have the church hall after us. And some of them would turn up in kind of punk gear and then change. It was all, I remember it vaguely.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the kids that used to, a bit younger than me, the 14-year-olds, when I was 18 in Virgin Swansea, they would bring their punk clothes in a bag after school. And I used to let them go up in the office upstairs and they'd come down in their punk clothes and then they'd have to reverse that when they went home on the bus later,
Yeah, I mean, and I can imagine, I never went, but I can imagine the energy of punk gigs. And I mean, obviously, you've seen a lot more soul nights than I have. there is a real energy to soul as well. It really energizes people, doesn't it? It really lifts crowds. It really gets people going. And I mean, I'm just curious. So it was almost, you stumbled upon this scene, you joined this club. How did you go from there to start playing? Because I know that.
Oh, quite a few years later. I
Okay.
mean, I did DJ once in Cardiff Chapter Arts Centre. I did a punk set, but only once, and that was like 1977. So that doesn't really count, you know. But I think probably a big influence for me was, even though I'd heard lots of Southern soul working at Virgin.
Yeah.
Elvis Costello made me some mixtapes. He used to be one of my customers at the Virgin Notting Hill Gate shop, and he made me some mixtapes. And on one in particular was stuff like Tommy Young, Barbara Acklin,
right,
as well as things like Dr. John and the Meters and that sort of, you know, the Southern soul stuff. And although I'd heard Shoes played, Bobby Bland's Shoes at the 60s Soul Club, I'd never heard the real ballady stuff that Bobby Bland did. Yeah. And on there, I've got one of my first records. If you
no, please listen, Wendy.
It's not a dance floor. It's not a dance floor. It's a slowy. It's on the Action label.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's nice.
And it's Bobby Bland, Share Your Love With Me, and that was on one of the first mixtapes that Costello made for me.
Wow.
And you know, it's a beautiful ballad, 1966 on Duke.
Yeah.
I got given this fantastic box of 50 Action label singles.
Oh my God.
All mint condition, all beautifully looked after by a dear friend, Mick Anthony.
Right.
But that's another story a bit later.
Well, we could come back to all of these stories.
He was the PA sound man at the Town and Country Club where I did the Locomotion, and it was his sort of parting gift to me, because he was an old mod originally, and he wanted to collect them. But share your love with me. I mean, I you know, you like gospel music, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
The voice of an angel. Yeah. You know, it's like, I can't play it on the dance floor, but that's why I love doing radio, because I can play stuff like this.
Of course you can. I mean, and that's the thing, isn't it? That one of the things that happens when you're gigging or you're playing a set is you have so many things that you can't play, but are still part of the fabric of your life and your experience and, you know, your memory and your emotional attachment to the journey. Yeah. I mean, that track is just beautiful. And
he's probably, along with Jackie Wilson, he's my favourite all-time singer, Bobby Bland.
Yeah.
I remember I made a mixtape. You know, it's the whole thing about mixtapes. You know, if you like Nick Hornby's High Fidelity, you know, mixtape for me is like the best. And I made a mixtape probably about 10 years ago now for Paul Weller.
Yeah.
And I didn't put the artists' names on it. I just put the tracks. Like, and I put on These Hands, Bobby Bland's These Hands, you know, Small and Mighty.
I do. Yeah.
And he texted me a few days later and said, "What is that? What is that? These hands? Who is that?" So I said, "Oh, it's Bobby Bland." And then the next thing I know, he says, "Oh, I managed to get hold of a copy on 7-inch." I said, "Oh, lucky you." And then about 6 months later, he was on Desert Island Discs, and he chose Bobby Bland's These Hands as one of his Desert Island discs. So I was like,
well done. I mean, that's amazing. You know, it's interesting because, like, another conversation that keeps coming up is, this is a show about vinyl, but mixtapes. Everybody has memories of mixtapes, and everybody has the memory of sharing, because we could have done
all mine. Mine are all filed in boxes up there.
Wow.
You know, where you make the covers and you do all the artwork on them and all.
Yeah, that must be that's quite an amazing archive. That, have you catalogued it? Do you know what's there? Or I'm just asking because I'm not
a kind of train spotter. I'm not I could never archive anything. I've got boxes of stuff. I've got tins of badges. I've got tins of record gig tickets, but they're not archived. They're not beautifully kept or anything. They're just all shoved in individual boxes. I know where they are, so that's all that needs to happen.
Wendy, I think you need an assistant. Do you need someone to come and, because listen, genuinely, and I'm genuine about this, there is something about the kind of collecting that someone like yourself has done, and you've kept everything. And there's something then about the curating of these collections, of being able to not necessarily give them to a museum, but possibly...
No, but lots of people have done it. So, you know, when I went to some punk record cover exhibitions at the Hayward Gallery, 8 years ago or something, I was like, oh, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. Or fanzines, oh, I've got that fanzine. But, you know, I'll leave that to other people. It's not really my thing.
If I was closer, I'd offer to do that job, because it's kind of something that I love to do. But I wanted to pick up on something, because I was reading about the Locomotion, and I was reading about, and it started at the Town and Country Club, didn't it? And I read somewhere that notable DJs were given kind of early opportunities to try out, like Norman Cook played an early set. I wonder whether you might, because to me, I knew all about the Locomotion, and it was through the NME. I was quite a timid teenager, so I never made the trek up to London. It always, even though it's only about 70 miles, it seemed too far for me to go and manage. So I never went, but I've heard all about it. Perhaps you might just talk about the Locomotion, and there must be some amazing stories.
Yeah, I mean, it was an old 1930s cinema. It's now the Forum Ballroom again, or Forum O2 or something or other, still a gig venue.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful 1930s cinema. And in the 70s and very early 80s, it was an Irish ballroom, and you'd have 200 people there dancing to an Irish show band on a Saturday night, and then having a big punch up outside.
Very nice.
And when I was in the band, when the band split at the end of 85, our agent at the time, he took over the Town and Country Club as a venue, putting bands on and stuff like that. So he just said to me one day, look, you've got a fantastic record collection, you know loads of people, put on a party as a kind of celebration of us taking over this club. So I did one, and there was 50 or so people, you know, like the Pogues, and I think Costello was there, and some of the Madness Boys were there, the Camden crowd, you know. People from the NME, Adrian Thrills, David Quantick, people like that. And we had such a laugh, we had such a great night that Ollie Smith, who the guy I'm talking about, he said, do it again. So I did it again, and this time 200 and something people came, you know. And then it was like, well, why don't we do it every week, and we'll put a kind of appropriate band on a Friday night. So for the first sort of year, we had Junior Walker and the All Stars, Rufus Thomas, Martha Reeves and Vandellas, oh my God, Booker T and the MGs, Curtis Mayfield.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, they played from 7:30 till 10:30. And then at 11 o'clock, you know, we'd keep people in. 11 o'clock, I would just go on the decks till 3 in the morning.
Amazing.
And it just got bigger and bigger. Adrian Thrills used to do that column in NME called Thrills. And he was always like, you know, little things like, oh my God, it was such a brilliant night at the Locomotion, blah, blah, blah. So it gave me instant publicity. So I was very lucky, really. I think I was just in the right place at the right time. And what's really wonderful is it ran until the Town and Country Club closed every Friday night. And I think the sort of intervening years, I'm amazed how many people come up to me and say, oh my God, I used to come when I was 15, I used to bunk in. You know, you didn't need ID in those days. Anyone could get in as long as you didn't look like a thug, you know. And we had no dress code, no door policy. You could come in jeans and trainers if you wanted, which was very different to all those sort of West End clubs like, you know, the Limelight and the Wag Club. You know, you'd get looked over on the way in, you'd be checked if you got the coolest clothes or whatever. But the Locomotion, it was like where everyone went after they'd been to a live gig somewhere. It was very much a sort of gig kind of crowd. Then I started to get some of the sort of 60s soul crowd, and some of the like Tony Class and the sort of scooter crowd. And you had the mod club that Paul J. Hallam was involved in Shepherd's Bush. That crowd started coming. A lot of kids started coming from the suburbs. You know, I've met so many people that came through those doors. There was 2,000 people every Friday night.
I was going to say it was 2,000 people, wasn't it? And I mean,
for a sort of not for the entire duration. Obviously, it started off quieter. Massively packed when I was doing the Tube. There's nothing like the Idiot Lantern to get people to come and follow.
Yeah.
And then obviously, you know, it dwindles off a little bit towards the end, but for the best part, there were 2,000 people every Friday night. And because I was behind the decks, I was just doing my thing.
Yeah.
But I've met so many people that formed marriages,
Wow.
you know, all came together. Great friendship groups, scooter clubs, all came together at the Locomotion.
Yeah.
Even the rocking scene, you know, my friend Nick and Camilla and Sarah Bolshy from Modcast, they all used to come from the rocking scene.
Wow, okay. I know that you would have played anything pretty much that would keep the dance floor going, and I imagine that it was an exciting time. Were there any soul records that sort of always filled the floor or became synonymous with the Locomotion that you played, or is that too difficult a question to ask?
Well, there were lots. I mean, Johnny Caswell, You Don't Love Me Anymore. Obviously, Curtis Mayfield, Move On Up.
Yeah.
Edwin Starr, 25 Miles. You know, all the classics that are played everywhere now. I mean, you know, in those days, you couldn't go to a club and hear, there was, you know, you could occasionally hear Few at the WAG along with other things.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really anywhere that you could hear, you know, Motown next to the Clash.
Yeah.
And when the first sort of good hip hop started coming out, I used to play hip hop and you know, Trouble Funk and Chuck Brown's Soul Searchers, and, you know, and James Brown's Funky People and all that all got mixed in with you know, so Dexys Midnight Runners, the Jam, the Clash, you know, Madness, whatever.
And many of them were there probably dancing to their own music, were they?
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's amazing. But I mean, that's just one of the small aspects, because you've played Glastonbury, you've played the 100 Club and all points in between. Perhaps I might get you to say a little bit about the 100 Club, because every time I interview someone, this place is such an integral part of people's journey and experience. Maybe I might get you to talk
I mean,
about.
I never really went to the all-nighters, because I'm, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning is late enough for me. I really like going to bed quite early. You know, so the idea of going out dancing, even in my 20s, the idea of going out dancing all night, I just couldn't do, you know. And so I think I've probably been to the all-nighters once or twice.
Right, yeah.
So for the 100 Club, for me, apart from what Adi still does there fantastically, is live gigs, you know.
Yeah.
Punk gigs, pub rock gigs, and then obviously it was threatened with closure, you know, only a few years ago, sort of 10 years ago. And my old band reformed to do a benefit at the 100 Club, just to, you know, raise awareness and money, just to save the 100 Club. But yeah, I mean, actually, as a venue to perform at is pretty shit, actually. It's very narrow and wide, so you're on stage and you've got like sort of a small depth of people in front of you, but they're all like, you know, but actually to go there and dance, it's fine. So you've got, you know, it's fine.
No, it's curious.
I'm just glad it's still there, and I hope after all this, you know, crazy times we're going through now, that these venues survive.
Yeah, no, I do too, because
I heard yesterday that the Mayor of London has got some money from somewhere to go towards music venues
to keep them alive while they're
to keep them going.
No, it's essential, because I mean, when we all come out the other side of this, it's going to be a very different landscape, and I wonder how. I mean, one of the beauties of people dancing to soul is the intermingling and this kind of stuff. It's going to be very strange.
I'm missing the most. I should be in Soho right now, 3 o'clock. I should be at Shea 66.
That's
Wardour Street, with, you know, 200 or 300 revelers on a Saturday afternoon. That's where I should be today, on the last Saturday of every month, and we obviously haven't been able to do the last 2 months, and that's pretty sad.
It is. I mean, how long has Shea 66 been running?
Nearly 2 years.
Okay. And what do you play there? Is it, what sort of crowd or what sort of music do the crowd?
It's not my club. It's run by Nick Bray, and I'm a guest DJ. But I tend to do quite a lot of. He has 2 or 3 DJs a month, and I tend to be the sort of link between the other two, you know, with the other 2 DJs. It's mainly nothing over 1970.
Okay.
Yeah, it's mainly old rhythm and blues, the sort of thing that would have been played in Soho, you know, when Georgie Fame was around, you know, in the sort of early coffee bar days. But you know, Andy Lewis, Mark Lesnar, Ian Jackson, Paul Smiler Anderson.
Yeah.
Trying to think, my brain's suddenly gone dead.
No, listen,
anyone out, but there's a whole group of us that love DJing there because it really is a great atmosphere. It's like the old days, you know. It's all us oldies getting together. We like Saturday afternoons because it means we can be home on a train and in bed by 11.
It's a nice time, though. I mean, it's an interesting thing, isn't it, in terms of how to put things on and at what time to play, and you know, if you're at an all-dayer, will people dance at 2:00 in the afternoon, and do they wait until 11:00? I mean, it's
I did a set at the Modcast did their first weekender, which is Eddie Pillow and Sarah Bolsh's events, and they put a weekender on, their first weekender in Hastings.
It was in Hastings, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah, at the Azure, and last October. And one of my sets, I did a few sets, but one of my sets was on Saturday afternoon at 2:00. And obviously the sun was shining in, and you think, well, no one's going to get up and dance.
Yeah.
So I just played things that I could get away with on a radio show. I didn't have to aim it at the dance floor.
Yeah.
Everyone laughed. You know, I had some really nice comments about what I was playing. I even sort of squeezed Graham Parker in.
Wow, okay.
But anyway, a modcaster, yes.
But look, I mean, it's a lovely venue that kind of is right on the seafront, isn't it? So it's quite an evocative.
Straight out to sea,
yeah.
And all things being well, it will be back on this October. So.
Yeah, no, I saw it, and I remember because it was, as you said, it was in October, and I had been to Hastings and come back and was looking at it going, oh God, why aren't I there for that? Because it looked amazing. Because Hastings has had a bit of a revival, I think, hasn't it, in terms of venues?
Well, I think it's just lots of people from London of a certain age have had enough of London.
Yeah.
And Brighton's lost its appeal. I think Brighton's, it's lost its appeal for a lot of people of our sort of generation.
Yeah.
And I think it's best of both worlds because you can still get into London quite quickly. Yeah. But anyway, I'm not going to big up Hastings because I don't want any more people coming down.
No, not at all. Listen,
with all their London money.
No, well then that's a nice segue on to, and I know it's an impossible task to condense a lifetime's collecting into 3 records. What's the second record you've chosen, Wendy?
I know. Oh God. Well, what did I choose? Otis Redding, Look at the Girl.
Oh, lovely.
God, look at, this is me. I don't, I don't collect like posh things, and I just like if it's got a paper sleeve, that's great, But Otis Redding, obviously, I've always loved Otis, and I even named my son Wesley Otis.
Okay.
25 years ago, Wes Montgomery and Otis Redding.
Wow.
And, so I've always loved Otis, and that one goes down really well at Shea 66. It's slightly quirky to dance to, but there's always somebody who'll do a fantastic dance to that. Obviously not one of the obvious Otis Redding tracks, but would have gone down well at the Locomotion as well. So
do you think he's suffered from the fact that there a lot of people, not in the scene, but like in general, only know him for like the big stuff, when actually there are some much more interesting things around if you dig?
Yeah. I mean, it was such a short amount of time, wasn't it? Sadly.
Yeah.
And I'm not a sort of aficionado of the history of Stax or anything like that. It's like I just know what I love, and Otis, his voice, just absolutely beautiful. And when I was I can't remember if it was I was DJing or if it was the Red Wedge tour, I can't remember, but Billy Bragg and Wiggy and I, when we were on the tour bus, there was always Otis Blue being played. Always Otis Redding.
Yeah.
Well, unless Wiggy got the Rolling Stones in, then we didn't know. No, it was always a lot of Otis. And I was just thinking about, the time of when Paul Weller finished the Jam and started the Style Council.
Yeah.
Soul music, he'd obviously really was into soul music, and it definitely through Paul Weller, a lot of us discovered old soul music.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I've heard people on your program talking about that as well. The Jam really influenced them, listening to their versions of Heatwave and Move On Up and things like that. But when the Style Council formed, I was in the boot hills. I was, you know, Dexys Midnight Runners, Come On Eileen, Dungarees, Big Quiffs, and you know, and I'd run into Paul Weller. He'd be like, what you got that bloody quiff for? What you got a quiff for? But I did go and see the Style Council. It was at a little theatre in London. I think it was a TV thing or something. It wasn't a main gig. But that would have been about 85, I think. So yeah, he definitely influenced my musical taste.
It's amazing the constancy, isn't there, that one person can, you know, influence so many people just by simply encouraging you to go off and explore yourself.
Yeah, I think we all do it though, don't we? I like to think that I've done the same. You know, people come up to me and say, your Locomotion Club was the soundtrack of my youth, you know, and I'm still listening to the records you used to play, and whenever I hear this track, it makes me think of you. It makes me think of those nights. And, you know, I mean, Andy Lewis, who was Paul Weller's bass player for 9 years, you know, I first met him on the Locomotion dance floor. He was at university in Lampeter, and he would come down when he was coming to visit his folks in Watford, and he would come along to Locomotion with his little BOAC bag with his talcum powder and his change of shirt, and do the spins and all that on the dance floor, you know. So he kind of came, and I influenced him, but then I gave him some DJ slots, and the next thing we know, he's influencing me, because he's just got the most fantastic mind for, you know, knowledge of music. And so yeah, I love DJing with Andy. Even to this day, me and Andy, when we get together on the decks, we do double decking, and it's the most fun you can have with your clothes on.
But listen, it's so joyful to hear you talk about it, because it's just community, isn't it? It's connection and community, and there's a shared history, there's a shared geographical history as well. But when it comes down to it, it's just people dancing and listening, and you don't even have to dance to be part of this. Because
have you ever been to a silent disco?
No. What is a silent disco?
It's the most horrendous thing. I went to a festival. And they had a silent disco. I thought, I've got to find out what was this silent disco. And you go in, you put your headphones on like this, and you're hearing the music that the DJ's playing. But if you take your headphones off, there's no sound. Right? Okay. So you're in your own kind of bubble. And I walked out after 5 minutes, because I thought, I'm not embracing the other dancers. It's not like we're not sharing. It didn't feel like we were all sharing in the big sound that you get off on when you're at a club.
It sounds like a punishment.
Like, why bother?
It sounds like the sort of thing that would happen to you if you dance too much. Sorry, but we're sentencing you to 6 months of silent disco. It doesn't strike me as something, because there's nothing that beats the opening bars of a big tune on a big sound system, that suddenly people stop what they're doing and they just come together.
And you just rush onto the floor.
Absolutely. And then you know, a lot of the people I see dancing, they've been rehearsing their steps for years and years and years, and are just sublime. I'm a hopeless dad shuffler, but that's fine. I don't mind. I mean, I'm
a freestyle. I just do my own thing.
But this is the other thing about it, though, is it's such a great opportunity to express yourself as well. And obviously, playing sets, you're able to express yourself, and sometimes there are boundaries or limits depending on the crowd. But it's an opportunity for the people in the crowd to express themselves as well. And it just, I don't know, every time I chat to someone, I just can't get past the fact of how weird our lives would be without this.
I mean, bear it.
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what to do.
I'm completely deaf in my right ear through music.
Okay.
So I'm really aware that I have to look after this one working ear.
Oh.
And when I DJ, I've got the headphones up loud. I've got the PA up as loud as it would go, you know, before it starts feeding back. And I have to remind myself to put an earplug in, because I cannot lose that ear. If I lose that hearing, you know, just shoot me.
Be the silent disco, won't it?
I can't live without music.
No, it'll be silent disco, and then it'll be
it'll be silent fucking everything.
The cruelest irony of all. But look, I mean, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is, and this is a conversation I've had with other people, they're putting on gigs and playing sets is only one thing nowadays that, you know, people, especially people like yourself, because you're incredibly hardworking. Where else do you give people a chance to hear your music? I mean, you were talking about the Modcast. You did a live set for them a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah, they did a one of these Zoom things, and
yes.
It was global. It was
yes.
intercity, because they had lots and lots of DJs from all over the world, and we all had 30 minutes each.
Yeah.
And that worked. You know, I mean, some of the sound quality wasn't great, but it was, you know, it was fun, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I really enjoyed doing radio shows as well. But
yeah.
nothing beats having a crowd in front of you.
No,
you know?
no, there's no substitute. But I mean,
and that's what I'm worrying about because of this coronavirus. Because we're all getting on a bit, and I'm worried that the confidence of people is not going to be back.
It's going to take a while for
come
people
out and dance.
Yeah.
In a little sweaty club.
Yeah, I mean, over here in Ireland, I think last night it was announced that pubs might start opening in August. But if you think of the concept of going into a pub in a few months' time, you know, you're not going to be able to necessarily stand next to anybody. It's going to be limited. You're not going to want.
I mean, if you ever came to Shea 66, there's no way. You'd have to limit the numbers to like 20 people.
Yeah,
and then it's obviously not cost effective at all. So you know, it's not good. So until there's a vaccine, I think. Anyway, let's not go there.
No, but but it does bring us to an interesting phenomenon, which is why we're talking as we're talking over Zoom, because suddenly everything has gone online. I mean, and Facebook is awash with people playing DJ sets, which I think is great, but Facebook isn't happy, so it will mute this stuff or it will block it. And I mean, one of the impulses for this series is I wanted to talk to people about soul and hear their soul stories, but I didn't want people to play their records because it's
thing and
and also, I mean, there's a point at which if you stay on Facebook too long, there's too much. And it's hard to switch between on a Friday night. I mean, Aidy's been doing some great stuff and there's been some great sets. But if you're not careful, you can just flip from one to another, and it's in the end it becomes a little bit limiting and self-defeating, I think. And I want everything to stay alive, as you say. You know, the club that we have, the D8 Soul Club in, it's an old working men's club. So on a Friday night, if we have a soul night, there are a few older gents who come in and sit in the snooker room and listen to the music, but you would be terrified of putting on another gig and then some of these old lads being around, and you know, so no, I have no idea how it's going to be.
What's going to happen.
No, but that's why I wanted to ask you about things like Mixcloud, because you're very, very regular posting stuff. I mean, how do you see Mixcloud or other online platforms? You do online radio as well, I think, don't you? Or you record?
I haven't done I've been doing for the last 2 years a monthly radio show at Brighton 1BTN, which is Brighton FM radio station, and I would go to the studio there.
So you'd go over there, right?
I'd spend 2 or 3 days compiling my 3-hour set, working it all out, timing it all, you know, and getting the train to Brighton, doing my radio show. So that's like 4 days a month out of my life.
Right.
I love doing it. Don't get me wrong, I love doing it. But when this happened, I obviously can't go on the train to Brighton.
No.
Then the studio was closed down, and I'm not technically minded. I don't have yet. I've been researching, but I don't yet have the setup to do radio shows from home.
Right.
And in my time of deliberating about whether I should do it or not, or to do like a little live locomotion thing or something from home, everyone else is doing it, and I just think, you know, it's like you said, you can overfill the airways with people playing records in their living room, and it, as much fun as it is, occasionally, it will still never replace the joy of being with people that you really like and having a good old dance and close-up hug with people on when a record you love comes on. It's just not the same. You know?
No.
I think for a different generation who are used to this sort of screen interaction, relationships,
yeah.
screens. It's not how I work, you know.
No. But it's interesting because this then brings us back to the fact of the physical object. That's what it's all about. That's what's at the heart of this. That's at the heart of your story. The 7-inch singles, the 12 inches behind you.
Yeah,
so,
well, the Kent compilations, as one of your other guests talked about, when I first started doing the Locomotion, you know, we didn't have the 7-inch singles. We couldn't afford the 7-inch singles.
No.
And so 80s and Tony Mounts, you know, Ace, they put together, and Dean Rudland, you know, they put together those Kent compilations, and they were just, that's what I played. I played all those classic Northern Soul tracks from my Kent. I've still got the entire collection behind me here. You know, they're all scratched to buggery because
because you played them out.
21 vodka and tonics later, you know, on a Friday night. So without those classic, because obviously that was pre-CDs, the Locomotion. When it,
no, I mean, and they're so central to this story. I mean, and when I was talking to Paul, I was trying to think of the first one I had bought and I couldn't remember, and it was Club Soul. That was the first one I ever owned, and that's the one that's got Jack Montgomery on it and bits and pieces. And to this day, I still hear some of those tracks, and I'm that awkward teenager that I was, feeling uncomfortable about myself, but just being amazed by this music.
Well, that's the power of music, isn't it? You know,
it's the clumsiest of segues you're ever going to hear. But that might move us nicely onto your third single, Wendy. What have you chosen?
Well, it's very difficult, you know.
Can I just ask, have you got a pile down there? Are you off the top of your head trying to pull? I'm happy for you to choose.
Well, I haven't got it out in my box. It's in the box, but I wanted to talk about Motown because,
please do.
I don't want to come across as being a wedding DJ or whatever, but you know, you put a Motown record on. If you played something and you kind of the crowd are not quite sure, and you stick a Motown record, it's just like everyone loves Motown. I don't know anyone who doesn't love Motown. Even people that don't like reggae or ska will love Motown. And I've met a few of them. But you know, I wasn't aware of how much just playing one record could do for somebody until this is another name drop, I suppose, but Nick Hornby wrote a book called 31 Songs, and it was about his favorite 31 songs, a bit like we're talking here, and he writes about why particular songs were really important to him, whether it's Patti Smith's Because the Night or Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run or whatever, what they've meant to him over his life. And one of the songs he chose was the Velvets' Needle in a Haystack. And the whole chapter is about him coming to the Locomotion and asking for the Velvets' Needle in a Haystack every week.
And you remember him asking every week?
I remember a guy asking me. I don't remember who it was. I didn't know who it was. He obviously wasn't a writer then.
No, not at all. Wow.
Or certainly wasn't famous. It was just a guy that lived in North London who used to come to the Locomotion. But then when I read this chapter, I thought, oh, yeah, that's the guy that used to ask me for. And he says in his book that, you know, he would just hear that record come on, and he wasn't a dancer, so he would go up, because it was a cinema, old cinema, it had the balconies, and he'd go up into the top balcony just to look down on the dance floor and see, you know, 2,000 people dancing to a song that he'd
asked for. That's amazing.
So I think I couldn't do today without mentioning Motown, and I couldn't have done the Locomotion without Motown. You know.
No,
but that track is So it's quite interesting, because even High Fidelity, he was on Desert Island Discs actually, and he talked about High Fidelity, and he based Rob's character on me.
Wow.
The weirdest thing. He said that the club in the pub that Rob used to do was based on the Locomotion.
Then that
was like blew my mind.
I think it is High Fidelity where he talks about Donny Hathaway's The Ghetto, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think so. Was that a record you played as well? Because if my memory is terrible, but I think he says in the book that it's a song that's very hard to dance to. I mean, it's an amazing song, but it's just, I mean, my memory to one side, your memory of this actual happening, which then folds back into a novel, and then we're meeting today across the wonders of Zoom, and we're talking about a 7-inch single from when it was early, wasn't it? Was it 60? I can't remember when it was. It's just amazing. It's just an extraordinary kind of circularity.
I've got it down there.
I just listen.
Yeah.
You know,
but talking about being an influencer.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays you talk about being an internet influencer. The idea that I could have influenced Nick Hornby, you know, into writing about Rob, this character who works in a record shop and DJs and runs a club and does mixtapes for his girlfriends and stuff. It's just like, it's wonderful. I just wish they'd made the film in Archway instead of Chicago or whatever it was.
Well, yeah, that's for another show. Listen, I could sit here and listen to you all day, but I think I will let you off the hook for the moment. It's been absolutely wonderful, Wendy, just listening to you talk. And I imagine I
look forward to seeing the other ones that you've got lined up as well. So
well, yeah.
I mean, Adrian J. So yeah.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that, and I've got some more coming up. But it just, for me, I just want to say thank you to you. And as I said to everybody's just so generous with their stories. And it's just, for me, I am just naturally curious. I have a relationship and a memory with the scene and all of these kind of things. But just to hear you tell, and I'm sure if we were here, there would be 1,000 more stories. So we might end up doing a part 2 of this one day, Wendy. But for the moment, listen, thank you so much.
Yeah, just shut me up. I'll get some gaffer across that.
Not at all. Not at all.
No, pleasure. Thank you, Barney.
Thank you so much, Wendy.